Welcome back, everyone. To all the higher professional education or HBO educators tuning in today, I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this deep dive explainer. Today, we are unpacking some seriously transformative research on assessment practices. We're going to jump right in because we're talking about a genuine paradigm shift here. What researchers like Dominik Slushmans and René Kneiber perfectly describe as the assessment revolution, or Toetsrevolutie. Over the course of this explainer, we're going to figure out how you can completely master the concept of feedforward in your own courses. Our goal today is to distill the absolute best practices from leading Dutch universities of applied sciences so you can stop exhausting yourself with grading and start truly empowering your students.
Waarom negeren studenten onze feedback? Or, to put it in English, why do students ignore our feedback? Look, if you've been teaching for any length of time, you've lived this frustration, right? You spend your entire weekend armed with a red pen, or you're up late typing out these incredibly detailed, thoughtful comments on a student's assignment. You hand it back, and what actually happens? They skip right past your beautiful paragraphs, flip straight to the final grade, and toss the paper into a drawer, literally never to be looked at again. It is so demoralizing. But the research from the assessment revolution tells us something really important. This isn't necessarily because our students are just lazy. It's because the way we have traditionally delivered feedback is, by its very nature, a dead end. You see, the whole core of the Toetsrevolution paradigm shift is moving from looking at the past to looking to the future. Traditionally, we spend basically all our energy kijken naar het verleden, looking at the past. We use our feedback to justify a grade for work that is already completely finished. But the massive shift we need to make is toward kijken naar de toekomst, looking to the future. Assessment shouldn't be an autopsy of what went wrong, you know? It should be a roadmap for what happens next. If we actually want our feedback to be used, it has to actively improve future performance. And to do that effectively, we need to break this down into 3 essential steps. Let's look at the first one.
Okay, so the first essential concept of our feedback trio is feed up. This is all about clarifying the end goal and the expectations before the student even begins the task. I mean, think about it. A student cannot possibly succeed if they don't even know what the target looks like. Both Ghent University and the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences highlight this as the absolutely critical starting point. Before we even entertain the idea of grading, we need to make sure our students have a crystal clear understanding of the destination. And that brings us to concept number 2, feedback. Now, in this specific context, feedback has a very precise definition. It's about providing insight into the student's current status relative to that goal we just established in the feed-up phase. This isn't about telling them they are good or bad. It's just answering the question, where exactly do you stand right now? It highlights the gap between their current level of understanding and the final expectation. But just knowing there is a gap isn't going to magically close it.
Which leads us to the third, and frankly, the most crucial concept of all. Feed forward. The magic word here is actionable. Feed forward provides the concrete, forward-looking steps a student actually needs to close the gap between their current status and that ultimate goal. It directly answers the question, what do I need to do next time to get better? Without feed forward, feedback is honestly just criticism. Feed forward is the actual engine of learning and development. So, when you look at how this builds into a complete framework, educational models from universities like UGent and HVA show us that these 3 concepts form a continuous, highly logical student journey. Feed up asks, where am I going? Feedback asks, how am I doing right now? And feed forward asks, what is next? If you try to isolate these, the whole system breaks down. If a student knows where they are going and how they're doing, but has zero clue what to do next, they just stall. As educators, our primary job is to ensure this loop remains completely intact throughout the entire semester. Section 1, feedback as a design issue, moving beyond the red pen in course design. To guarantee this loop actually stays intact, research from Judith Gulekers tells us we have to intentionally weave feedback into the very architecture of our curriculum. You literally have to design the course so that students have a subsequent, built-in opportunity to apply the feed forward you give them. But here's the catch. Even the absolute best course design is going to fail if students don't know what to do with the information. As Professor David Carlis brilliantly defines it, feedback literacy is the understandings, capacities, and dispositions needed to make sense of information and use it to enhance work. The crucial point to take away here is that we have to actively build our students' feedback literacy. We really can't assume they just naturally know how to decode a lecturer's comments and magically turn them into an action plan. They need to be taught how to be self-regulated learners who actively seek out, make sense of, and implement that feed forward. And that perfectly sets up this wonderfully evocative Dutch educational idiom, het zweet op de juiste rug. The sweat on the right back. I absolutely love this phrase. It forcefully illustrates a hard truth for us as teachers. If you, the lecturer, are working harder on the feedback than the student is working to process it, well, the sweat is on the wrong back. The cognitive load of processing, understanding, and actually applying feedforward has to rest entirely on the student. Our role is to facilitate that process, not to do the heavy lifting for them.
Section 2, Feed Forward in your HBO Practice. Actionable strategies for your courses. All right, let's get practical and look at 3 highly actionable approaches, derived directly from Dutch higher education research to bring this assessment revolution right into your everyday HBO classrooms. Here is strategy number 1, and it's inspired by research from the Fontes Academy of Physical Education. It is all about how we use rubrics. Too often, we just use rubrics as a grading checklist at the very end of an assignment, right? But if we want self-steering students, we have to flip that entirely. We need to clarify expectations early by handing out that rubric on day 1. Even more importantly, we should require our students to use the rubric as a self-assessment tool before they ever submit a draft to us. By shifting the rubric from a passive teacher's checklist into an active catalyst for self-regulated learning, we immediately put the sweat exactly where it belongs, on the student's back. Strategy number 2 comes from the guidelines established by the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, and this focuses heavily on peer feedback. This is such a brilliant way to build that feedback literacy David Carlos was talking about. First, you have to explicitly train your students in the actual roles of giving constructive feed forward. Then, you create low-stakes practice rounds where they give feedback to one another. By having students evaluate each other, they learn to deeply internalize the criteria. Plus, it fosters this amazing open culture of dialogue in the classroom. And as a fantastic bonus, it takes a massive amount of grading pressure right off your shoulders. For strategy number 3, we're looking to the really impressive work done by Hogeschool Utrecht on programmatic assessment. The traditional model we're all used to is teach, test, grade, move on. Programmatic assessment completely rewrites that script. It relies on continuous, low-stakes data points rather than one massive, terrifying final exam. The focus completely shifts to the student's development over time. In this model, feed forward isn't just an event at the end of a term, it becomes an ongoing conversation. Every single piece of work is just a stepping stone to the next, which makes the feed forward immediately relevant and basically impossible to ignore. And speaking of being immediately relevant, take a look at this powerful takeaway from the Toetsrevolutie blog. Feedback shouldn't haunt you unnecessarily long. This is such a critical warning for us as educators. Feed forward has a super short shelf life. It absolutely must be timely and directly applicable to the very next task the student is going to tackle. If you give a student feedback on a presentation skills assignment, but their next presentation isn't until the following semester, that information is just going to haunt them for a bit and then eventually fade away entirely. It has to be actionable right now. So, as we wrap up this explainer, let's summarize the core of this entire transformation. We are moving away from an outdated model where the docent worked hard, the exhausted teacher burning the midnight oil just to correct mistakes. Instead, we are stepping boldly into a model where the student works hard. By utilizing feed up, feedback, and feed forward, and by actively designing our courses for feedback literacy, we transform ourselves from human grading machines into strategic designers of learning experiences. I want to leave you with this final, rather provocative question to chew on. Durf jij het zweet op de rug van de student te laten? Do you dare to leave the sweat on the student's back? It takes courage to step back, honestly. It takes real bravery to let go of total control, to stop correcting every single tiny error with that red pen, and to trust in a process that empowers your students to steer their own learning. But I promise you, if you can make that shift, you won't just revolutionize your assessment. You will completely revolutionize your entire teaching practice. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and I wish you absolutely all the best in designing your own assessment revolution.